Hello, and welcome to episode 5 on What of the United States Split Overnight. Let's get started. Well, actually, before we get started, I have a little update that I'm going to add to the map. And here it is. Boom. But wait, we're not done yet. Boom again. So basically, what I changed in the map is obviously I added names, but other thing that's important is that I added capitals. So you can now see the capitals of all the nations. As you can see, not a lot of states moved their capitals afterwards, the only exception being Pennsylvania, of course, who moved their capital to Philadelphia and such. However, much of the nations have kept their original capitals. Now, of course, the one thing that you've seen is the name change of the Southern Federation. Because now I no longer call it the Southern Federation anymore. It's now called the Federation of the Mississippi, which I think is a better name because of the Mississippi River. And I think the Southern Federation was kind of bland, so this is not a name change that they made. This is the name change that I made. So if it's called the Federation of the Mississippi now, it's always been called the Federation of the Mississippi. But I just thought it was. I just think this is a better name. And also, Henderson is the official name of Las Vegas now. So we can move on. Starting off, of course, with an alliance update. This alliance update is the admission of the Dakotan Federation into the Midwestern Alliance. The reason why this is, this map is outdated, hang on. There. But the admission of the Dakotan Federation, and that's the official name, into the Midwestern Alliance is now official. This is because, of course, North and South Dakota are both Midwestern states and share a lot of similarities with states like Minnesota and Iowa. So them joining this alliance makes sense. However, of course, Montana and Wyoming are not Midwestern states. However, of course, they're in the Federation, and this Federation is very, like I said before, this Federation is very stable, so they'd probably support them joining a new economic alliance because that means, more money. So they're all for joining this alliance. What about the Sioux Nation? Will they join in on the Midwestern Alliance? No, they will sit out for this one. They will be on their own for a little bit because they want to separate themselves from the rest of the states, which is understandable because they've been under control of foreign powers for a while and they just want to do things on their own. So them not joining is completely understandable. Now, the next update is something that a lot of you might have been expecting, and that is California making their own economic alliance with the states in its economic sphere of influence. That being, of course, Utah, Henderson, Arizona, Navajo, Hopi, and Idaho. Now, the question is, will Cascadia join this alliance? Because you remember last episode that Cascadia pretty much left the sphere of influence. Not officially, but they basically decided to do things on their own now. But the question is, will they join this alliance? And the answer is no. They will keep doing things on their own. However, the offer is still on the table. They are not fully opting out of joining this alliance, but in the future, they think, we can do things on their own now, but in the future, if things take a dark turn, then we can join your alliance. And California's like, all right, we're fine with that. So that is the updates for the alliances, the economic alliances. And we can move on to some more things like the formation of the Hurricane Cleanup Alliance. Now, of course, this is kind of a stupid name. This is just a name that I got off the top of my head. It'll definitely be called something different, but just so that I can be more, things to be more simpler for you to understand, I will be calling it the Hurricane Cleanup Alliance. And of course, as you expect, this alliance is to help with the cleanup of the devastating hurricane that occurred last episode. Now, of course, I did touch up on the nations coming together to focus on this hurricane cleanup. However, I didn't go full into detail. So, basically, this episode will be focused on this hurricane cleanup and what effect it will have on the different states. Now, of course, that not the whole episode is going to be like that because that'd be kind of boring, but it'll mainly be focused on that. So let's get started. So, as you might have seen, in the Federation of the Mississippi, the capital has been moved to Baton Rouge. Now, the reason for this is because, of course, New Orleans has been completely devastated. So, they temporarily moved their capital to Baton Rouge to help out with the effort to make things a bit easier for the government. Right now, New Orleans is pretty much a wasteland because in this lake right here, which I forgot the name of, water managed to seep into, you saw on the flood map that I had, water managed to seep into and flood the entirety of New Orleans, rendering it completely useless. A lot of the effort of this rebuilding, because a lot of the other states didn't really get hit that hard, a lot of this rebuilding was focused on getting the capital of the Federation of the Mississippi, New Orleans, back in business. So, workers from Texas, Alabama, Jamaica, Mexico, Florida, Cuba, Bahamas, all others come together to help out in the cleaning of New Orleans. Even in Alabama, Tennessee, Missouri, states that once left and despised this nation were now sending support to the Federation of the Mississippi to help out with their rebuilding. After a while, New Orleans was able to get back up, and the capital is officially moved to New Orleans. Now, of course, this process would take about a few decades to happen. And of course, New Orleans is only a shadow of what it once was, but now, at least, it is now a functional city again. Of course, at this point, Texas, Mexico, Cuba, Jamaica, all these other states managed to rebuild their damages as well. So now we can move on to something different. Now, of course, I did say that we'd focus on the Federation of the Mississippi cleanup from the hurricane the whole episode. I kind of lied. I thought that there would be a lot more going on, but there wasn't. So just ignore what I said. But yeah, let's move on to something different. Mainly the admission of Colorado into Lincoln. Now, of course, this might seem like a pretty random change. However, Colorado has been on its own for a while now, and of course, with Nebraska and Kansas uniting, Colorado is sort of like, all right, you know what, we can join in with you guys. So they join in with Lincoln, and now Lincoln is looking pretty big. You might be seeing a sort of pattern here where states aren't really, like I said in earlier episodes, states aren't really going to be declaring war on each other that much. They're mainly just going to be joining up with each other, helping each other out. So, this is a pretty welcome change. And of course, I did make the capital of Lincoln. So I was planning on making it Omaha, but that wouldn't really make much sense, so I made it Lincoln. I couldn't really think of any other name other than Lincoln, so there you go. Now, one issue that I ran into when discussing the independence of well, not really discussing, but one problem I ran into that I realized after the independence of Lakota is Mount Rushmore, because Mount Rushmore has faces of U.S. presidents on it, and it is in the Lakota Federation, which is a Native American controlled territory. So, what would happen with Mount Rushmore? Well, it would pretty much just be completely ignored by Lakota. Like, not really ignored, like, it would still be a national park, but it wouldn't have as much attention as it would be in the United States. The Dakota Federation would offer to buy it from Lakota. However, the Lakota would refuse, as Mount Rushmore is in the middle of the Black Hills, and the Black Hills are very important to Lakota. So the Dakota Federation getting Mount Rushmore from Lakota would sort of interrupt that. So Mount Rushmore will remain within the Lakota Sioux Nation, which is kind of amusing. But anyway, moving on. To the northeast, specifically western New York. Now, I talked about in a previous episode, I think it was episode 3, that when Quebec gained independence, it wouldn't really have much an effect on on the northeastern nations, the support for Canada would likely dwindle a little bit, but the nations there would still be very loyal to Canada. And I did say that Western New York would probably be the area that would most likely want to get independence. Now here's the time. Western New York asked Canada for an independence referendum, and since they already gave Quebec independence, this isn't really something that they can really, refuse. So they're like, all right, fine, we'll give you your independence referendum, and here's how it goes. So I'm sorry I didn't pull up the counties map for this, but here's how the independence referendum went for Western New York. As you can see, there are a few bits that are pretty important to share. Mainly this big old bit right over here that voted yes to independence, which include the cities of Buffalo, which yeah, Buffalo is in the yes zone. Um, I didn't really put it in that. I didn't really put it in that good. It's kind of like here in a way. However, the area around Niagara Falls and the easternmost parts of eastern New York voted for no. So, how would these borders be played out? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at them. Okay, so as you could see, the areas that are around Niagara Falls are stayed within Canada. However, the rest are put back into New York. Now, as you can see, the capital is set as Buffalo. There was sort of like a voting thing going on of whether it would be Buffalo or Rochester for it to be New York's capital, and Buffalo was chosen mainly because of its access to Lake Erie. So, the country of East Niagara is formed. Now, of course, I might change the name later because this name is kind of dumb. So, if you have any suggestions on what I could call East Niagara, then put it in the comments below. But otherwise, it is kept as East Niagara. Alright, now moving on to another minor border change, this time regarding Cascadia in Canada. So, the more educated viewers know that in Washington, in I think it's like around Vancouver Island, in here, there is a city or town called Point Roberts. And Point Roberts is interesting in the fact that it is detached from the rest of the United States by Canada because of the 49th parallel. Now, Cascadia and Canada come to an agreement that Canada will buy Point Roberts from Cascadia for around, I'd say around 50 million or around 100 million. I definitely overestimated the purchasing of, one thing. I don't remember what purchase it was, but it was the Oklahoma Panhandle. I definitely overestimated the purchase of the Oklahoma Panhandle. It would probably be around 200 million or 300 million. However, Cascadia's buying, or Canada's buying of Point Roberts would probably be around 100 or 200 million. So that is a very minor border change done. And with that, we can conclude episode 5. Now, I do have to say, I do apologize for the wait for this episode, and I also apologize that this episode is very anticlimactic. I am sort of running out of ideas for this, as you saw in my community post. So, the map changes is sort of like I don't know, something to make up for the lack of episodes these past couple weeks. But if you have any ideas on what I should do for episode 6, put them in the comments below because I really want to keep this series alive, but I also want to keep this realistic, and it's sort of come to the point where realism is sort of leaving. So I'll see you guys in episode 6, and yeah, so bye.